Hi, I'm Dan Schmitt. I do a weekly television show called Team Chicago Champs. My website is teamchicago.tv, teamchicago.tv. We're at the Studebaker Museum, but we're not going to talk about the Studebaker. We're going to head back to Chicago. I'm going to continue to take apart my Triumph engine, explain how internal combustion engines work. Even Studebaker had to learn about internal combustion engines going back to the early 1910, 1904, they started with their first gasoline engine, and you're going to learn something about engines. And don't forget my website, teamchicago.tv. Before we can take this cover off, first we have to take this cover off. Now this cover connects the exhaust cam, there's a sprocket here, to the magneto. There's a sprocket here. So let's get this cover off first. And make sure yours have a little sandwich bag. You can put the parts in and keep them separate. Now you can see the belt drive and the two sprockets. They are the same diameter, everything turns at the same speed. Okay, now we got to find a small wrench. Okay, so this long bolt goes into the cam, and then I need to find a bolt to put on here because it's a taper fit. So I located the proper bolt that fits the threads on this taper shaft. So we're going to drive the bolt in. And we give it a good ramp with the hammer, and that should break the taper. Okay, now we can pull this gear. You notice there's a taper here, and that goes into the cam. It's a taper fit, and there's a little keyway also. So the taper fit and the keyway to keep this gear aligned and in position with the exhaust cam. Make sure we put this gear into the bag. Take the belt off. Small Gilmer belt. I try to replace this belt every year. I think in all the years of racing Triumph, I broke this belt one time. Okay, now we're going to work on taking this cover off. So before we can get this cover off, we got to remove the shift lever. You notice on the Triumph motorcycle, the shift lever is on the right side. In fact, the British bikes always, I believe, shifted on the right side. Harley Davidson shifted on the right side. When the Japanese bikes came, they shifted on the left side. Some of the Italian bikes shifted, God, I don't know. I remember riding some that shifted on the right and some that shifted on the left, and some of them used GP. GP shifting is where first is up, second, third, fourth, and fifth are down, or fourth is down. Standard shift is first is down, and then your up gear is a 1, 2, 3, 4 up. On our race bikes, road racing, we used to change our shift to the GP. That way you were always shifting down. So if you had a shift coming out of a corner, it'd be easier to shift down than try to lift it up. And that's one thing I had to learn, road racing and flat track racing, and shifting right foot, shifting left foot. You had to be able to do either, or you had to mentally know how to change. Right. Pull the shifter off, put the bolt back in, don't misplace any of your parts. Okay, now we're going to start taking the cover off. Now there may be, all the oil has been drained, but there may still be some little oil, so I'm going to take this cover and put it underneath here to catch any oil. There might just be a little bit of oil. Use my speed wrench here and begin to take this cover off. Pretty tight. And now we're going to pull the cover off, and then I'm going to show you the magic of four-stroke engines, why four-stroke engines work, cams, crank, connecting rods. Let's get this cover off nice and gently. Give it a couple little taps. I had it glued on last time. I didn't have a gasket. Okay, loosen up. Got to be very careful. I don't want the idler gear to come off its shaft. So I'm going to take it nice and easy. I'm going to peer in here. Okay, that's critically important because this gear here determines the timing on the cams. And we're going to get into it. I'm going to rearrange the cameras. I'm going to explain exactly how all of this works together. And this is it. This is the gear set. So when people talk about multitasking, this right here, multitasking, way before there was computers, way before there was an internet, this is what is called multitasking. Let me show you what I'm talking about. First of all, down here, this is the crankshaft. Connecting rods up here, crankshaft down here, crank goes around, up and down. This is the crankshaft right here. This is the idler gear in the middle. This distributes power from the crankshaft to the two cams. Everything has to work in conjunction or the engine can't run. So, when the crank is going around, like such, turning the idler gear here, the two cams which are here are operating. Not only is the crank turning the idler gear, turning the two cams, these two cams are also multitasking. As you can see here with the intake cam, this is the oil pump. The oil pump is right here. So as the cam goes around, you can see the oil pump is going up and down. And that's how oil is pumped through the system. In the meantime, the exhaust cam here, as it's going around, on the stock Triumph motorcycle, there's a different cover, not the cover I have, and the cover and the points fit right in here. So that tapered gear that fits in here, it's a tapered shaft that goes in here, and your points on the Triumph, they're right here. So even the cams are multitasking. The intake cam is also running the oil pump. The exhaust cam is running the ignition, turning around, opening and closing the points to distribute spark to the spark plug. So you got to also remember, this is not that of a high revving engine. This bike makes its most power between 6,000 and 7,000 RPMs. But this is the magic of a 4-stroke engine, right here in this diagram. As you can see, this is the crank sprocket, which is half the diameter of the other two sprockets. So the cam, the exhaust cam, the intake cam turn at half the speed of the crank. So you get the crank sprocket, you get the idler sprocket, which is the same size as the two cam sprockets. You can see multitasking right here. You got the intake cam right here is working the oil pump, and then the exhaust cam here is also running the ignition, turning the lobes to open and close the points. And you can see on this diagram, on the exhaust side, it's two dots you line up. On the intake side, it's a dot and two slashes. And on the cam side, it's two slashes lining up with one point on the crank. I hope you learned something about a 4-stroke engine today, the relationship between the crank and the cams, and how the cams run at half the speed of the crank. If you want to get a hold of me, it's teamdan45@gmail.com. Don't forget, teamchicago.tv, walkwithdan.com.